good morning.
Good
I
morning.
just took a bike ride to my friend's place, and it's a beautiful morning here.
And here in New Zealand, it's the end of the day. We're coming into spring and you're coming into autumn. So we're at different ends of the world.
Yeah, that's we can really feel gratitude for all this technology now because it it allows us to meet like this.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have a new friend in Finland, all the other side of the world.
We are, yeah, from different parts of the world, but we share something, some views about the body mind. And you have been uh, um, you have seen my method, my online course.
Yeah, so perhaps we should explain how it was we met,
Mhm.
because I've been writing about really the science of healing, because that's something I'm actually a hospital doctor, a hospital specialist, so this is a strange subject for me, but I've become more and more interested in recent years, and I wrote a blog about it and put it on my website. I think you saw that. That was how we got in contact.
Yes, it was wonderful because I have this online course, and there are already 3,600 people on the course, and we have this Facebook group. And one of the persons on the online course posted this wonderful article about mindless medicine, and I thought it was really great. And it was great also because it was written by a doctor. And in the end, you tell that please contact if you have any projects. And I thought that you have might already got so many mails, but I thought I'll write anyway. And yes, that's how we met.
Yeah, so I had an email from you just out of the blue. I wasn't expecting that. And you introduced yourself a little bit and you had a link to your course. So I was curious to see who this person was. So I went online and I saw the introduction to your course and I thought, this is really impressive. You know, this young woman has done something really special. And you just have this beautiful energy when you appear on the video. And, I was attracted to that. So you offered me a link into the course so I could examine it. And with growing excitement, that's what I did and spent some hours. I used up all the data allowance on my mobile phone examining the different aspects of your course. And I thought, this is really remarkable, and the success you're getting. And it was interesting to me because it aligned very clearly with what I've learned about the science of how the healing occurs in us. And I thought, well, I have some knowledge to explain why your program could work. And it was
Yeah.
interesting to have a conversation to share that. So we've had some emails and we had a little conversation on the video. And then we thought, let's do an interview and talk about our shared passion.
Yeah. uh, and my view is quite different because I'm not a doctor, but I'm an architect. But my background is that I was myself, I was really sick.
Hmm.
I was hypersensitive. I had all these autoimmune diseases and this syndrome that made me really react to cold really easily. And that's quite hard because if I'm in Finland, I was reacting all the time to cold. But then I found these principles of neuroplasticity,
Yeah.
and I started studying them, and I found different methods that are based on neuroplasticity. Then I started developing my own method uh, based on everything that I had learned before. I'm an architect, but then I also studied philosophy. And I think that's a really important part of my story because I wanted to understand the structure of our
Mhm.
mind or of our experience of being a human. And that helped me a lot when I started to create this method. And I also worked as a specialist for people who had sensitivities related to the environment. So I studied to be like indoor air specialist.
Yeah.
So I also studied a lot about microbiology and chemistry and so on. And in my method, I combine like everything that I've learned.
And I mean, that really is remarkable. And you have healed yourself from severe allergies and autoimmune disease and, you know, a number of conditions. And you're reporting that many of the people who do your program are finding that their serious allergies disappear, or their chronic illness,
Yes.
the chronic pain disappears. So not so long ago, that would have been very surprising to me.
Yeah, but it's actually, it's not even the objective is not only to heal. The objective is actually something else, is to find the healing power in ourselves, actually, or to find an inner state of peace. And then it's a side effect what happens. And also when I healed myself, I noticed that some of the symptoms that had been like bothering most, they just disappeared really fast. But then I suddenly understood that actually the root cause is under, and I felt like an onion. I was just peeling layers and layers, and it's quite an interesting journey to see what comes next.
Yeah, well, it's really inspiring. And my background is so different. And, you know, just a year or two ago, I couldn't have had this conversation. This would have been really weird for me, because I started my career, I wasn't an architect, but I was an engineer. And then I became a doctor, and then I trained as an anesthesiologist. And on Monday, I will be back in the hospital in the operating room, caring for patients. So that's kind of one of the jobs I have. And my whole career, I've been really determined to try to improve healthcare from a scientific perspective. So I've in senior leadership roles in hospitals. Was on the national committee that gave advice to the New Zealand government about how can we improve quality and safety of healthcare. And I've worked with the World Health Organization. And in more recent years, I've worked with my wife, Meredith, because we felt that healthcare had become so focused on technology and a form of medicine that doesn't even see the person and the patient, that we wanted to bring more humanity and compassion to healthcare. So we founded a movement called Hearts in Healthcare, and that work has taken us to many countries around the world, and I've written some books, and we've been campaigning to try to make the healthcare system more humane. But in the last couple of years, I've learned about and trained in a form of healing, a method called Havening Touch. And that has completely changed my beliefs about what human beings can do and our capacity for healing. And I run a clinic each day, each week at home, and I'm seeing life-changing results occurring in minutes and hours that just kind of blow me away. It's so astonishing for me as a doctor and a scientist. And that's really why I became so interested in your program. And I could see the way you had designed it was actually aligned with the scientific principles. So, you know, that's really why we're having this conversation. But it is astonishing to see someone with a severe pain syndrome, like a condition called trigeminal neuralgia, which is severe neuralgia pain in the face, very difficult to treat, often incurable, just disappear in 20 minutes. Because we discover the story that sits behind it, the pain, and then when the trauma in the story is healed, the pain goes away. And other physical health problems. And that's because disease, the word disease actually means dis-ease. It's the stress in our emotional, psychological, spiritual lives that actually is the foundation that leads to so much physical disease. And often our body is really smart. It's trying to give us a message. And often the symptoms of illness carry a lot of meaning. And if we listen to our bodies, you know, with a more philosophical kind of ear, then we can begin to understand and be grateful for the message. So, for instance, I knew of a lady who had a terrible, very severe rash on her face, very red, very angry, been to lots of doctors, been put on very powerful drugs, just wouldn't go away. And she was talking to a doctor who has an interest in mind-body medicine, and was asking, well, when did this rash start? And she said, So after my husband Frank got cancer, I just couldn't face it.
Mm.
And this is a smart doctor who listened to those words, I just couldn't face it, and realized the cause of a rash is that this is the body expressing her terrible
Yes.
pain and distress at her husband's cancer. So she had psychotherapy, and then the rash went away. It was cured.
What I believe is that all our suffering, all our diseases are caused because of resistance.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what, if you can't face something, that is resisting something. And the resistance can be on any levels. I know that medical science separates that we have different defense mechanisms in our body. But as an architect, I want to see like behind, I want to see the whole picture. And in my theory, I believe that we can also see that we have one defense mechanism that includes all these hypothalamus pituitary axis, HPA axis, the limbic system, our immune system, also our mind's defense mechanisms, because we have the small analytical mind that we are conscious of, and then we have the huge amount of subconscious mind, and between that we have like a barrier. Some people call it the critical factor, but I see it as a part of our defense mechanism. And if something that we don't want to get through comes to our consciousness, then that will alert the defense mechanism. Like in this case, this woman, she didn't want to face the fact that the husband has cancer, so that caused a defense reaction. And actually, I believe that all our diseases are cause of our system resisting in some way something. And also the actual thing could have been in the past, and even sometimes that we are not conscious of it. So for example, if we are babies and something happens that causes our defense mechanisms to become alert, that will cause that our brain will start detecting possible threats in the environment. And sometimes it will pick something like, for example, pollen or a food allergen from food, and think that that is the cause of the reaction of the alert, and it will start resisting it. But sometimes I believe that our system can even misunderstand so that it thinks that the threat is actually inside our body or in our skin. So it will start resisting it and create reactions.
So I didn't really understand those things until recently. And the form of therapy I've trained in is really for emotional trauma and PTSD and phobias. But it's remarkable because there's a very detailed molecular science that sits behind it. And it kind of explains how your program works as well. Because when we go through a traumatic event, you know, when we're frightened or anxious or scared or threatened, under certain conditions, we kind of take a picture of that whole event and we hardwire it into our brain, in a part of the brain called the amygdala, which is linked to what you call the inner guardian. And we kind of like make a multimedia web page of the whole circumstance, the setting, the things that happened, all the things out there, the sights, the sounds, the smells, but also our body reactions, you know, our fear, our emotions, our racing heart, the constriction, the inability to breathe, the pain, all those elements are connected together with new nerve connections. So every bit of that. And what we now know is the way that those nerve connections are made. And this is neuroplasticity that can occur in 5 minutes. So we know that new nerve connections are made, that one nerve talks to the other, it gets an electrical signal, comes down, and it releases a little bit of chemical that goes across a little gap. And that chemical, those molecules react with things called receptors, which are on the surface of the cell. They're like on-off switches. So when one molecule of that chemical, like glutamate, goes into the receptor, it creates a little voltage in the membrane of the cell. And we have hundreds or thousands of these receptors. And if enough of them get stimulated, then it creates a voltage signal along the next nerve. So the way that we put the computer code in our brain to have all these elements, linked together, is we have a reaction in the nerve cells where we feed receptors very quickly up to the surface of the cell, and we lock them in place with a molecule called phosphorus, and they stay there for the rest of our lives. And what that means is every time something in our senses that just reminds us of that time, then the whole thing can be activated. And what it activates is our thoughts, our stories, our feelings, our emotions, and all our body reactions. So we have a thing called an autonomic nervous system, which is the nervous system that looks after our heart and our breathing and our pulse and our digestion, and does all the automatic functions of our body. So it influences that, and it influences things like pain or stiffness or rigidity or tension in the muscles, and all these things can occur. So if we see that trigger, it could be just a yellow dress or a tone of voice, or it could be that pollen or that smell, or that some reminder, or you could just remember the memory and then all the symptoms come back. So every time, so you talk about how people have an identity in their illness, and they go to peer support groups because I'm a diabetic and I have this terrible chronic illness and I have to live with it for the rest of my life, and they spend the whole time with this story about how they're diabetic. Every time they remember that story, they turn on those nerve cells and they create all the reactions again. Now, these receptors go up to the nerve cell in about 5 minutes. And that occurs when we have very high frequency brain waves called gamma waves. And that's in trauma or stress. The amazing discovery is that we can reverse that reaction in 5 minutes. That if we remind ourselves of that story or that event or that trauma just briefly, it activates the nerve cells that are connected with that, where all those connections are. And then if you make the person feel completely safe and connected and loved or have gratitude, then the mechanism reverses itself. And we have a mechanism that unlocks the receptors and pulls them back into the cell and disposes of them. And then the nerve connection is gone. So now there's no reaction to the pollen. There's no emotional reaction to the story. It's completely gone. So these are the mechanisms that we have that, for me as a doctor, to learn about is completely astonishing. And I see it every week in my clinic, like someone who has a terrible story of trauma, and 15 minutes later it's just gone. They can't connect to the feelings or the body reactions anymore at all. And very often their physical symptoms then go away. So it's really, this is some of the molecular science that's sitting behind the way that your program works.
And the interesting thing is that we think that people want to get rid of these symptoms, but then there's one problem. We become almost like addicted if this has continued for years and years.
Yes,
it is incredible, but it becomes safe to the person. So it requires a lot of determination to change these reactions. Sometimes it's just like a snap and it changes, but sometimes it's more a process where a person has to be ready to release these old habits and old connections.
Because it might need a very powerful change in identity.
Yes, for example, for me, I had been for years, I had been the sensitive person. And also it was part of my identity because I wrote about all the chemicals, all the threats in the environment. I was a really well-known blogger.
Expert in that subject.
Yes. And also, I remember the first time when I smelled a chemical and it didn't cause me a reaction. for a second I was like empty. I was a bit scared. I was thinking, who am I now?
It's so curious. I know you've shared examples of, your own medical health problems and how you've managed to heal those. So I thought I'd share one of my own, which
Mm.
again was quite surprising for me as a doctor. So I had a lot of urinary problems, and this is a common problem in men. And I had two problems. One is that it was getting harder and harder to pass the water because there was a restriction of the flow. So it would take me a long time, standing at the toilet. And then, but also I'd get this terrible urgency I had to pee. And so the combination of the two was very painful and frustrating. And it would wake me up 5 times in the night, and I'd get this urgency to empty my bladder, and I'd have to go to the toilet, and then that would take a long time. And because of the restriction, I couldn't empty my bladder well. So the bladder was kind of getting bigger. So eventually, this got to the point where one day I couldn't pass any urine at all, and I had to go to my own hospital emergency department. I was in my doctor clothes, and I went as a patient, saying, "I'm so sorry to come, but I need some help, and I can't empty my bladder at all, and I needed some treatment for that." And then I was referred, and I saw a urologist, a specialist in these kind of conditions. And they did all the scans and the tests, and they showed that there was severe obstruction, and my bladder was very enlarged, and it couldn't empty. And so there was really objectively defined medical disease. And the answer to that was an operation to do a rebore to, open up the restriction. So I saw a surgeon in the hospital, and he gave me a date for surgery just 3 weeks later. And I had signed the consent form, and I was saving up money to pay for this. And about that time, I learned about a different healing method, which allowed me to understand that in my personality, there are different parts. We have a true inner compassionate self, which is kind of the core of our being. But when we go through stressful events, often we create kind of different parts of our personality. So there's one part of my personality where I get very academic, and my voice changes, and I speak in a way that really infuriates my daughters. Because it sounds, it makes them feel as if I think they're stupid because I, speak in this kind of funny voice and I'm very academic. There's another part of me that's like the hero doctor who can save everyone. So, and I realized that when I wrote in my notebook that the words, "I can't express myself," and I thought there's something really important about the meaning of those words. And suddenly the penny dropped. I realized, oh my goodness, this is what my body is telling me. I literally cannot express myself. And the part that I couldn't express was actually my deepest identity, which is being a healer, which is kind of like a woo-woo, not a very good thing if you're a doctor, because it's not scientific and everything else. And the kind of the heroic doctor part of myself was kind of scared because this other identity was emerging, which was the healer doing this weird stuff. So the conflict between the two was actually the cause of my symptoms. So in one day, when I resolved that conflict and gave some support to that wounded part, the part that was the healer, the small part of me, then my symptoms improved so much that I cancelled the surgery, I tore up the consent form, I stopped the medication, and I went for some years without needing surgery or medication, because the problem, I had uncovered the meaning of my illness. So that was a surprising example for me as a doctor. And when I told my own doctor, he looked a bit puzzled.
Yes, and what I teach in my method, I could use the same case.
Yeah.
Like this, in your case, it manifested like this. And I believe that one possibility also is that actually our culture creates these core beliefs also. That, for example, going to toilet is something you should be ashamed of.
Yes.
And that might be something that is already planted to us, like when we're babies and little children, and we are not conscious of it. And then on top of everything, then this is just one way that this problem can manifest.
Yeah,
I know that there are many people on my course that they have problems going to the toilet. Just they cannot go, for example, anywhere else but then in their home. And I believe that the reason might be that our culture thinks that going to toilet is something a bit shameful.
Yeah, and I was amused and delighted to hear on your course that you talk about, going to the toilet. And I thought,
Yes.
Fantastic. Just because
Actually,
it's natural about it, and it's, we all do that.
yes, and it's somehow related for me to the feeling of gratitude.
Yes.
In Finnish, actually, it's funny because in Finnish we don't have the word gratitude. We only have thankful.
Okay.
And then if you think about being thankful, is usually you're thankful when you get something. But I believe that gratitude is actually more related to a word coming from Latin that is connected to graceful.
Yes.
I don't know how to express it. Gratia. Gracia.
Yeah, that's right.
But,
Yes.
and it means like divine order, or the feeling that everything is in their place, everything.
Yeah.
And I feel that the feeling of gratitude is at the same time receiving and actually giving. And yes, if we're human, then it's like receiving oxygen and food, and also giving out carbon dioxide and all these nutritions when we go to the toilet. So yes, that's the way how I feel gratitude. It's just a feeling of receiving and giving at the same time.
I agree with you completely, and that's, I do one day a week in my home. I do a clinic where I'm seeing clients with very severe trauma or PTSD or severe phobias or severe depression or anxiety, and I give them an hour-long appointment. I have 6 appointments, so it's a very full day of people with major trauma. Now, most therapists, if they do a whole day of this kind of stuff, by the end of the day, they're exhausted because there's been
Yes, if they just
terrible stories. At the end of my day, because the therapy I do is healing for myself as well, I mean, I just feel such intense gratitude and awe and positive energy. And I just see my clients just shine as the very best version of themselves. I mean, there's this incredible kind of transformation that occurs. I kind of don't have to do any work, because what I tell every client is that, Maria, you have this amazing healing intelligence within you. And I don't need to figure out how to do any healing. In fact, I don't do healing. It comes from within you. My job is to create the conditions under which that healing can occur. And when there's very complex trauma, there might be layers and layers. You talked about peeling the layers off the onion. And that's a metaphor I use. And that can be very complicated, and it might go back to very early in life, where we don't have a memory in the first few years of life, because our brain's not fully formed and we don't have that conscious memory. But I don't need to create a strategy to figure out how to, plot this healing path, because it just unfolds by itself automatically. And how fast it goes and the different directions, it just unfolds in the most perfect way to allow the healing to occur. And I feel that's divinely inspired, and I just feel such intense amazement and gratitude and love and positive energy. And by the end of the day, I have a silly grin on my face for the whole weekend, because I just have seen miracles occurring, and it happens with no effort. So the way that you have chosen gratitude is so important to healing, I think, is genius, and that's why your program works.
Yes, but I've been facing some troubles also, because in Finland there's this safety agency, and they are considering, they don't know if it's a treatment, and I have tried to explain that this is not a treatment, and that I am not treating anyone. And somehow I think for doctors And to these official people, it is difficult to understand that the healing process happens inside, and that if people are getting good results, it's not because of me, and because I am not a medical person and I'm not trying to tell that I'm one, but they're like wondering how is this possible, and I'm trying to explain this, that actually the process is inside. You don't need a treatment.
If I can help you at all, that would really be my pleasure.
Yes.
Because I've been in the, very senior roles in healthcare, and I understand the kind of medical framework and beliefs that basically medical science, the way that we do research, is that we remove any element of human consciousness. So if we're testing a drug, so we have a new drug and we want to test, does it work for healing ulcers? So we compare it to a fake drug. So we have fake pills that look the same, but don't have any active medicine in them. And we randomize the patients, and half the patients take the real medicine and half the patients take the fake medicine. And no one knows which is which until afterwards. It's called a randomized control trial. The problem is that about 30 or 40% of the patients who take the fake pills get better as well.
Yeah.
It's called the placebo effect, and it's because they believe in the treatment. So this is very annoying for doctors trying to do research, because they're trying to show that the medicine works and the patients who didn't have the medicine get better as well. So what we do is that the amount of healing that the people got through placebo, we just subtract that from the amount of healing they got from the medicine and say, oh, here's an extra 10%, that must be the chemical, the medicine. So yeah, it really does work. It's better than just the fake medicine. And what that is doing is, the reason that the patients heal is because they're conscious beings. And they have stories and they have beliefs and they believe in the treatment and the medicine, so their body responds and they get better. But the doctors completely exclude that from all the medical research. So we've kind of created this brainless science where when the patient goes to the doctor with high blood pressure or diabetes or stress or anxiety or depression, they just give them a pill. They don't even, because they see the patient as a machine that doesn't even have a consciousness or isn't even alive, really. Because
Yes.
all of the science that we use in medicine is based on these randomized controlled trials that exclude the effect of consciousness. And what happens in doctor training is that we completely forget that humans heal themselves. So if you break your ankle really badly and it's distorted and it's in different pieces, you go to the hospital and you see an orthopedic surgeon and he'll put plates and screws and he say, I fixed your ankle. He didn't fix your ankle. The ankle heals all by itself. All he did was put it in better alignment so that when it heals by itself, it'll be straighter. But if you didn't put any screws or plates, it would still heal by itself. If you have a pneumonia and half of your lung is full of pus, you heal. We give antibiotics which assist the patient to heal, but the healing is done by themselves. The antibiotics can't remove the pus from the lung. The lung X-ray looks completely solid, no air in it. And yet a month later, you do an X-ray and the lung is completely like new again. The antibiotics didn't do that. That was the healing process. So we have these really strange ideas in mainstream medicine. And to you, even if I say that I'm a healer, that's a bad thing. I mean, that's woo-woo and that's not scientific and so on. But so that's why I've been researching and writing about the science of healing. This is how human bodies actually work.
I think even though the biggest problem has been that I've told that you can cure from allergy.
Yes.
But actually, even science also knows that allergy can come and go.
Yes.
But I think that the people say that it's dangerous to say that it can cure. But actually, I think it's more dangerous to say to people that you have a diagnosis and this is your diagnosis and this is it. Because I have been in that situation, and I remember when he wrote it and gave the paper, and it was a really intense feeling, and it felt like my whole world just changed, and this name on the paper is now my future.
That's you.
And my destiny. And I also know that many people that were my clients, they had these mild symptoms oversensitive, like hypersensitivity symptoms. They were mild, but then I sent them to this doctor who was a specialist, and the doctor told that yes, this is multiple chemical sensitivity, and this is a situation that will get worse and worse. Like in 1 month, you will have reactions to your friends' clothes. In 2 months, you will start sensing hypersensitivity to electricity, and in 3 months, you will have to live in a tent in a small island. And actually, you know, that is what happened. Many of my friends and clients had that story, and they were, in a few months, they were living in the Canary Islands in a tent.
Yeah. Yeah, and it happens, you know, when patients get cancer and they go to see the doctor and they say, you know, doctor, how long have I got to live? You know, 3 to 6 months. Why is it always in 3 months? You know, why is it never 5 to 7 months? It's always 3 to 6 or 6 to 9 months, or, you know, it's kind of strange. But I heard a wonderful story of a man, the father of a friend of mine in the USA, and he lost some weight and he had some abdominal symptoms, and it was a bit concerning. He became anemic. So they diagnosed a bowel cancer. And by the time it was diagnosed, it was very advanced. He had tumor had spread right through his abdomen. He had tumor in his liver. You know, it was really bad. And the surgeon said, well, we're going to take him to the operating room. And I'm quite pessimistic, but we'll have a look and see if we can do anything. We can't cure him because it's too advanced, but his bowel is blocking and we may be able to do a bypass. So he said that if we're in the operating room for 6 hours, that's better news. You know, we were able to do something. If it's less than an hour, it's very bad news, because that means it was hopeless and we couldn't do anything. He came back from the operating room in 45 minutes. And the surgeon said to the man's daughter, I'm so sorry, there's nothing we could do at all. Your father has very advanced cancer. There's no treatment we can offer, and he will die in 2 to 3 months of advanced bowel cancer. And I need to tell him that. And the daughter said, oh no, doctor, that's not what my father needs. He will never question you. He will never challenge you. I want you to tell him that the operation was a success and that he doesn't need any other treatment, because you've already told me there is no treatment you can give, so he doesn't need any other treatment because there isn't any. And he said, but that's a lie. I can't say that. That's not true. And she was very persuasive. She twisted his arm, and, you know, and as we say in English, you know, when you really want to persuade someone. So he went to the patient and said, well, we've done your operation and you don't need any more treatment, and you can go home when you're feeling a bit better. So he went home to die with no medical treatment and lived for 9 years, because he knew that the operation was, you know, a success. And actually there are now 3,500 fully documented cases in the medical journals about people with advanced terminal cancer that spread everywhere that just don't die. Some of them cure themselves. So there's this amazing capacity for healing, even with very severe illness. But that's really embarrassing for doctors, because you say you're supposed to die in 3 to 6 months, and they come back 20 years later, and the doctor feels a bit stupid, and you know, they're supposed to be the expert.
Yeah. So what do you think, which are the conditions for healing?
So what you mean is, you know, what do we need to create so someone can find their self-healing? Yeah. So I think human connection is really important. And the form of therapy I do, called havening touch, it's a form of touch that's very natural. And what it does is it reminds us of the first caregiver, the mother holding and touching the baby. And what that gives is a feeling of safety, and a feeling of human connection, and a feeling of love. And I think, you know, there's some gratitude in there as well. And what we know in each cell in our nervous system that holds these stories, holds these connections, that creates the symptoms, that there's these two mechanisms. One wants to reinforce it and put more receptors on the cell surface and lock them in place. And the other reaction wants to undo that. And there's a balance between the two. So if we can activate the thought or the feeling about the symptoms or the illness, and then create a positive state of the mind, then that second mechanism starts working and removing the receptors and breaking those links. So this is the neuroplasticity at work. And we know from science that human beings are profoundly connected. So there was a very beautiful research where they had a doctor and a patient together in a consulting room, and they put monitors on both of them, the doctor and the patient, to measure their pulse, their heart rate, and their breathing. And you might know about HeartMath. That's an organization that has really looked at, if you examine the heartbeat, it doesn't, it doesn't stay exactly at 60 beats a minute. The heart rate goes up and down a little bit like this. Goes up and down with breathing, with different things. And actually, if you analyze very carefully that variation in the heart rate, you can tell a great deal about, is someone stressed, is someone relaxed, or whatever. So they were measuring things like this in the doctor and in the patient. And then they did a trial where the doctor is actually not speaking to the patient, he's just sitting there reading a medical journal. And they're measuring his physiology, and they're measuring the physiology of the patient. And he's reading a medical journal, and nothing happens, nothing changes. But in half the patients, in secret, the doctor is doing a loving kindness meditation silently inside his head and sending thoughts of love and kindness and gratitude to himself and to the patient. What's amazing is that that changes his physiology. It also changes the physiology of the patient, even though the patient doesn't know that silently in his head he's doing this loving kindness meditation. So healing occurs in human connection, occurs in love, in kindness, in gratitude, in safety. These are the conditions. And that's why it's so important in the hospital that we have compassionate care. So I know from research trials that as an anesthesiologist, that when I see the patient before the surgery and the patient is frightened and anxious, if I hold the patient's hand, if I sit down on the bed with them, if I'm kind, if I listen to their fears and concerns, if I build some trust and rapport, if I'm empathetic, if I'm compassionate, the research trial shows that that patient will only need half the dose of morphine in the days after surgery, and their wound healing will be quicker, and they'll get out of hospital quicker, and they'll have fewer complications than if I was just the detached clinical doctor, which actually I used to be for many years, because I just had a job to do, and I was the doctor and this is the patient, and we talk in a certain way. So there's a lot of research now showing that human connection and caring has a huge impact on the outcomes for the patients, on disease or injury and healing. So those are the kind of conditions, and this is what's wonderful about your course and the presence that you bring, is that you bring this wonderful positive healing intention and this gratitude, and you just shine with that, and your program is so surprising because you're asking people, don't be annoyed with your pain or your symptoms, your allergies, be grateful. So you're creating these conditions, and it actually is, even though it's only a video connection, there is a powerful connection between you and the video and the person that's watching it. And so I think those are some of the kind of things that allow healing to occur.
Yeah, I think that stress is contagious.
Yes.
It's you have seen many studies about it. But so is healing.
Yeah.
And I think that there are also people who are like really lonely, but there are many people who are surrounded by people and loving people, but they still cannot feel the compassion and love. And I think that is also something that we learn in my online course, because we do these exercises where we just learn how it feels to be loved and safe and connected. And when you learn that feeling, then you can just, when you're in any situation, you can just like snap, take it and feel it. And even though you're alone in the forest, you can snap, feel connected to everything and feel supported by the forest. Or if you're in a busy metro station, you can also feel connected to all those people. Or if you're in your family, you can feel connected to the family.
Yes.
Because I think that nowadays, one of the biggest problems is that we're connected with these mobile phones, and and we're surrounded by people, but we don't feel the connection.
Yeah, 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 very much so. And part of it is, as you say, it develops in early life, in the first about 3 years of life, depending on, if our emotional needs are met and we have a secure form of attachment, then we tend to be loving and kind to ourselves and loving and kind to others. But if in our early life our emotional needs haven't been met, we have an insecure attachment. And most of the clients I see in my clinic have a very poor sense of self-worth.
Yes.
They don't really love themselves, and they're very unkind to themselves. They have this voice in their head going net 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 all the time, saying you're so stupid and you're useless and no one loves you and you're not worthy of love. And and I think it's overcoming that and learning to be compassionate, kind to yourself is really important. And then that opens you up to these feelings of gratitude and of peace and serenity.
Yes.
And then the healing reaction begins.
Yes, and also giving up from these. Sometimes I I feel that many have some feelings towards their family in early life, that it's my mother's cause, she did this or she didn't. But actually, when we start healing, we can just give up all those
Yeah,
feelings
yeah.
of blame also.
It's just such a beautiful place to get to when you just start to be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
You do something not so well, or you make a mistake, or you offend someone. Instead of beating yourself up, just think, okay, yeah, I'm just a human, and I was doing my best, and that wasn't so good. But just to, if that was your friend, you would say, don't worry, you know, that person really likes you anyway, and yeah, you had an argument or whatever, but just but we don't speak to ourselves the way we speak to our friends or our loved ones. We have these really negative voices. So yeah, if we can, yeah, and that's why your focus on gratitude, shifting that attitude is so important. And you do shine with that. I mean, it comes across in a very beautiful way, and it's lovely to watch you. And I was looking forward to this conversation because it's lovely to be in your company, um, and
Thank you.
and to share the things that we're interested in.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And I'm really happy that you are a doctor who is so brave to see on this other side of this healing process. It must take a lot of courage to
I'll
step from the.
tell you what did take the courage. 15 years ago when I stood up on a stage and started talking about loving your patients and about compassion and caring. I mean, that was just, it broke so many rules about how you were supposed to be professional as a doctor. And for so many years, my own medical colleagues just completely ignored my work. Like the nurses were really interested in different professional groups, and for about a decade, my own professional colleagues, didn't understand what I was talking about, and I was just weird, and it was kind of embarrassing, and and I just kept going. So that was what took courage. And what's lovely is that in recent times they've become to understand the importance of the work, as we found more and more of the science that shows that if you're compassionate, caring, your patients actually do much better. They're more likely to survive from illness, they have less pain, they recover quicker. But also the doctor feels better. They have this glow in their own heart. It gives them greater meaning in their work. So now there's a much wider spread acceptance. And even my colleagues who are anesthesiologists, who are very scientific, now I hear them standing up in the conference and speaking about the scientific topics, but they're also speaking about how important it is to be compassionate to your patient. I thought, yes, my job is done. Finally, they listened. And the culture of medicine is beginning to shift. So I think that my colleagues would have difficulty understanding what I'm doing now, the kind of therapies. But I don't try to persuade anyone. I just let people be curious. And so nice. My own doctor, I live in a little town in New Zealand, and we have about 6 doctors there. And my own doctor, I saw him a few weeks ago, and then he sent me an email. He said, "Oh, we've been noticing that some of our patients just suddenly got better." you know, all their medical problems went away, and they've been to see you at your clinic. And, you know, who should we start to send to you to see you? I said, well, anyone with chronic depression or chronic anxiety or chronic pain or chronic illness or, you know, trauma in their life history or emotional problems. He said, well, that's 90% of my patients. But so I didn't try to persuade him, but I just, you know, I let them be curious. And now I have an invitation. Please, can you come to the medical clinic and do a presentation about the healing work you're doing? And all the doctors and nurses want to come to listen. And then one of the universities has said, oh, please, we want you to join our faculty and start to teach this. So I'm just patient, and I'm subtle, and I wait, and, you know, until people are curious, and then they invite me. Because if you try to persuade people, then you have resistance.
Resistance.
We talk about resistance.
Yes. So I'm really happy about this conversation and that we're starting to do collaboration together.
Yes, I'm excited about that. And I think maybe we can combine our knowledge and approaches in a way. Because I'm truly inspired by what you're doing. I think you're remarkable. I haven't met anyone in the world like you. And, you know, just 2 years ago, I wouldn't have understood what you're doing, and now that I understand the science better, I'm thinking, yeah, I was just so happy that you sent me an email and we were in contact. And I don't know how this is going to, you know, evolve working together, but I feel confident that somehow we'll find a way to do that. We're on other sides of the world, but we can connect like this.
Yeah, I feel that something is going to come out of it.
Yeah.
Something really nice, cool. Wonderful.
Yeah, so I look forward to that.
And we'll tell all the people immediately when we know what's our plan.
So please, you know, make a video of this conversation. You know, put it on your website, put it on Facebook. You know, I'm not scared to be on camera saying, look, this is an amazing course and I recommend it. And it has some science behind it. And, you know, you can heal yourself and it's possible. And I'm a very senior doctor that's been in very senior leadership roles with a lot of experience from that position saying, I believe in this and I've seen the science and I know it works. And, you know, don't be so skeptical, you know, try it out.
Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome.